this is the magic, really, of sailing these waters with somebody like you who's been sailing them all his life, and barges you know inside out.
You're far too kind, Tom.
No, I'm not. It's true, Richard. I mean, you know, you're the man as far as I'm concerned. And the thing is that we don't have an engine on here. I've been going on about this, banging on about it ever since we've been making this film. But to me, that is really the key feature of what we're doing.
Yes.
And I rather suspect that you feel the same. You must have skippered lots of barges that have engines. But how do you feel about the heritage value about it? What do you think about it? What's your take?
Well, I think what we found today, and we've captured some of this on film, is that we've had to cut our coat very much according to our cloth as far as the weather's concerned.
We have.
So we've been using the vessel for what she could deliver to us. Whereas if we'd had an engine and a radar, we might very well already be home now, and we'd have been missing this lovely afternoon sail into the evening, waiting for our high tea and dinner. Now, if we'd done that, we'd have lost out, wouldn't we? Whereas waiting for the wind to fill in, waiting for the fog to clear, and then getting underway meant that we were just as engaged as we would have been. In fact, more so, and we're using the vessel for how the vessel is best used, I think. But what I take on the heritage take, I think that heritage means lots of different things to lots of different people, doesn't it? Your take on it will be different to mine. Yeah. And it's a broad church, and there is room in it for an awful lot. There's an awful lot of different interpretations. But I think what you can do is lose sight of what the boat was originally for, and I think that's absolutely crucial. What it did, its operation, is as much part of its heritage and adds value to how we can engage with it as the fabric of the vessel itself. So we can all enjoy looking at the Mona Lisa. It's a beautiful picture, it tells us lots of stories. We can all imagine what's going on in the background of it and what her smile actually means, can't we? But you can't engage with the Mona Lisa in quite the same way as you can engage with a sailing ship. And to actually understand the language of the vessel, you've got to operate it. You've got to pull on the strings, you've got to steer the wheel, and it's the activity that you do that way that becomes the language by which you understand the vessel. If you think about it, we hear a great deal these days words like engagement, words like interpretation, and quite rightly. Heritage Lottery and many others are keen that we interpret these assets, because that's what they are. They're assets for the nation. These assets so that people can understand them and can have some sort of relationship with them. But you don't need an interpreter if you're still speaking the same language that the vessel itself understands, and more importantly, that the people who used to operate the vessel themselves understood. Those old boys didn't need to have an interpreter to help them understand the heritage that they were operating were part of. They were the intangible cultural heritage that went with the asset. And without that cultural heritage, without the people, the asset is just that. It's just an item, it's just an artifact. It's just, at the end of the day, a heap of wood, metal and fabric. But to make that wood, metal and fabric mean what it can mean, you've got to operate it. And there's the value. And that, I think that's a key message for how we relate to heritage into the future. If only because we're very lucky here on this coast. We're in the River Blackwater. When I was lucky enough to grow up here, there were gentlemen who had words like Saturnita on their jerseys, or they might have had the King's yacht Britannia on their Guernsey. And those gentlemen are gone now. And there aren't many people now who can tell us what it really was like to run these ships in trade. Now, in a sense, we're all making history every day, and the trade that the barge is engaged in today is just as important in its own way as the trade that it was engaged in, carrying 170 tonnes of coal from Keedby on the Trent to Margate Gasworks. That was the trade that it was built for, but it's still trading today, and it's still doing a worthwhile job that's in its own way just as important. So history's being created every day. It didn't stop in October 1970 at Eastern Counties Farmers Wharf in Ipswich when the barge discharged its last cargo. It's still doing worthwhile work. But losing sight of that last cargo and the work that she did when she was designed to do it, we'd be losing so much that we can add to the flavour, the enjoyment and the relationship that people can have with the vessel today. That's my take on heritage.
Yeah. So these guys who were operating this vessel commercially, who we've got to, I couldn't agree with you more actually, we've got to go some little distance to try and climb inside their head, haven't we?
Indeed we
and,
have.
And
yeah.
we can never get right inside their head because of our upbringing, because of the aspirations that we've grown up with,
Absolutely.
but we can try.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the one thing they absolutely had running in their veins was an acceptance that if the wind was west in the wallet and it was on your nose, there was absolutely nothing you could do with it. So,
right.
so they had to make the boat work with what they had.
Yeah.
They couldn't just start the engine and punch straight into it and bash the wind on the nose.
No.
You had to do what the wind would do, and you had to do, more importantly, even what the tide would do. And today, everybody has an engine. They don't learn.
Well, pretty much, not everybody, but a lot
Around
of people
here,
do.
there are people who don't, but,
A lot of people do.
mostly
Yeah.
people do. And it develops an attitude of mind that you are in charge somehow. You're master of your fate. And when you're operating under the natural forces, you can still be master of your fate, but you're master of your fate under God very much. You're master under fate, under the things that you cannot change, and you must work with them.
I think that's a lovely way of looking at it. You're master of your own fate as long as you're in harmony with the elements that are allowing you to be that master.
Exactly.
But of course, we can all ride for a fall, can't we? And the sea is a very hardy animal to get the wrong side of. So it's about working with in harmony with the elements. You're absolutely right. But you know, you were talking about if the wind's on the nose in the wallet, you'd keep on turning if it was too rough to anchor, wouldn't you? You wouldn't stop. You'd turn for a whole foul tide. And as a friend of mine once said, if sailing's fun, what's wrong with sailing in the same place? And there's something in that. But what's fascinating about this barge, if you look down below at those parts of her cargo book that have been enshrined in the research down there, you'll find how quickly she was making passages. You'll see Tuesday, left Greenhithe, heading north, Yarmouth Wednesday, discharged Friday, left Yarmouth for Keedby, was there 3 days later. And of course there were days when the barge was laying windbound, sometimes for days, even weeks at a time.
Yep, there would
but
be.
the norm was relatively fast passages. And you could earn a lot of money if you were an owner of a vessel like this 100 years ago. When the wind was fair and the weather was good, the barge would be a very successful earning machine.
Yeah. And what about this? People suggest that not having an engine makes the barge less safe. And I think I would dispute that, but I mean, what have you got to say about that, do you think?
Oh my goodness, that's a very big question, because it's always difficult, especially in this day and age, isn't it, to sound as if you might be on the wrong side of the safety argument.
Yeah,
and I think
it's
that's
so
a
dangerous because everybody will shoot you down as soon as they look at you. People who don't understand very often.
Well, that's very true, I think. But nobody would disagree with safety being the most important feature of life, and of course it is, especially with the work that these vessels are doing now. They're taking sometimes young people, sometimes people with disabilities, and safety has to be a key feature of that. But it would be completely to misunderstand the relationship that you have with the vessel to see it as unsafe without mechanical propulsion. And there are plenty of examples, to turn that particular coin on its head, of people putting themselves in situations because they rely upon that mechanical propulsion, or because perhaps their engine fails due to dirty fuel or some awful situation like that, unexpectedly putting themselves in a position which is dangerous by its nature. They would never have been there if they'd been sailing the vessel without that propulsion to rely upon. And that, I think, can be equally unsafe and dangerous, and I think that therefore we should be very careful about letting that argument get too strong in our heads.